a little
Okay.
late for that, but that's okay. Hey, better late than never. Uh, let's see what else. So I was talking to Karthik last night as well. Oh, sorry, Kranti last night about this. And I'll let you guys solve the technology any way you want. But from what all his research and all his troubleshooting and whatnot, he is unable to find a way to get the backup loaded without a SQL Server Express database. So what he's doing is basically taking that backup, creating an instance of SQL Server Express, loading it into that database, and then requerying it with a Java client to basically extract it back out. So it's a little bit of long-winded and a little bit of overhauling, but I'm not sure, given the requirements we have with the project, we can access that SQL backup any other way. What I recommended to him, and he reached out to Chari, was to basically create a concourse process to actually do this, because this is like a perfect thing for concourse. Because what you could do is create a Docker container that's a SQL Server Express, and then you could basically feed that file into the Docker container, build it, extract the data, and then kill the container afterwards. So just an idea. Don't care how you solve it, but we need to be able to scale out to 5,000 different processes at once. So I'll stop there. Let anybody ask any questions before we go a little deeper in the architecture. Is that just a major dump?
Hey, Tim, Hari here. Two questions. When I see the architecture diagram, right? Hey, Tim, you able to hear me?
I can.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. No, I can hear you. You sound great.
Yeah. See, in the architecture diagram, I see two things. One is on daily feed and one is on weekly one. You have mentioned it. Okay. So what is the difference? Which one comes daily? Which one comes weekly? Or it's both the ways on configurable kind of stuff? Is it something? Can you throw light?
Yeah, let me. Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so here is probably the document you're talking about, right? Yes, no?
Yeah, Tim. Yes.
That's a little too big.
Tim, yeah, this is the one I was referring to.
So I think you're asking why are there two processes here? So right now, the weekly
Yeah, I
process.
see two nodes.
So Talon right here is the current ETL process that runs today, which is running in the RRS data center. And what that does is weekly, it extracts files from the Exida cloud, out processes them, and pushes them into Postgres database. And then Power BI consumes that data. So that is happening weekly right now. So the process that we're building and that we should focus on first is what I call this unit stats process, which in what I just proposed was a concourse job, basically, which will then extract the data from Exida, those 5,000 database backups, and then basically create a Docker container for every one, load that data into the Docker container, which is a SQL Server Express database, query the data out, and then do whatever we want with it afterwards.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Okay. So in the video, right? Yeah, in the video, right, they are mentioning that when they read the file, right, they compare the existing data and get only the delta or the new records which are inserted in the file. Okay.
Right.
Because they already have the database with them. But when we are
we're gonna have
unit, that will also have the same data set which is there in the Postgres, or how are you planning to address it?
Yeah, so there's two ways we have to solve that. First, we'll need a baseline for whatever the cutover is, and that baseline will then be what the pre-existing data is. But then going forward, we'll have all the data because we'll have the latest copies. So we should have all that directly. I mean, what I want to avoid, and when I know that Jamie, who is the business partner there, is we cannot read from that Postgres database directly using our process. So like from this line to here, we cannot have a line from here to here
Okay.
because this system is very taxed already. So the whole point of this whole building of new processes is that we're relieving the load and the risk from this processing down here.
Tim, this is Pawan here. So you mean to say from directly Exada we are getting to the unit stats? Is it per day or like daily wise or weekly wise initially?
Uh, how it exists today or what we're planning on building?
Like like no, you said like from Exada it is going to be either daily extract or a weekly extract.
We are striving for daily,
Okay,
but
okay,
that's not really the way it works because the way it works is you can issue a command to Exceed a Cloud to basically
okay.
take backups as often as you want. So whenever
Mhm.
you issue a command to the Exceed a Cloud, when the agents check in, and the agents check in about every minute, they will look to see if there's any commands for them to execute, and one of the commands will be a backup for them to execute. So then once they see that command, they'll execute the backup and then push the file to the Exceed Cloud. And then you can download that whenever it's ready.
So basically, as per you said, it might not be the real time streaming like that. Looks like a kind of a batch processing, right? No,
Yes, it's batch processing. We're
batch
not ready for
processing,
streaming.
streaming.
Live
Okay,
streaming will be a project that I call Phase 2 Plus, but
okay,
we can't work on that yet. We
okay.
should plan our architecture to get there at one point, and that's why I'm having the batch processes stream artificially to Kafka. I know it doesn't really make sense, but
Yeah,
the reason
yeah.
why it's done this way is when we switch on live streaming, we can
Mm-hmm.
swap out the unit stats and we can go directly from the machines. In fact, I actually have a diagram on that. So you can see I have basically the RRS machines posting to a gateway, and then the gateway is posting to Kafka, which is more of a real streaming model.
Yes. Okay.
Got it.
So from Kafka to Spark. Okay, fine.
So the whole point was that if you notice from like here back, I didn't change any of the architecture, whereas this stuff is
Yeah.
changing. So that was the reason why I'm artificially streaming. I call it streaming in quotes because it's not really streaming, but
Yeah,
streaming
exactly.
data to the HDFS and Spark.
Yeah, yeah. Basically,
So,
I think in the initial phase we might not we may need not to use the Kafka because it is not, we means we are not directly connecting to the I like pumping machines, right? Like
yeah.
the URL and the port number you are not giving
It's not
directly.
typical ingestion scenario what in the initial. I think you can from the unit stats we can directly dump if you.
To Spark.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
So that
fine as long as we can basically future-proof it as well and have
But but
backup.
but but yeah, Tim, I think let's even it is going through the Kafka, it doesn't matter because we will figure it out Kafka as because future as a next step. Anyhow, Kafka is required for an ingestion. But
Right.
now, right now, creating a channel and having that is also fine. I think we should not think much about having Kafka there now.
Okay.
okay.
I mean, I don't want to artificially spike our cost either for no reason. Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
okay.
Let's
The
see
one
that,
thing, right? If
Kafka is
we
needed or not needed. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine. It's this was proposed, doesn't necessarily have to be real world.
understood. Basically, because we do not want any unnecessary
eh,
burdens on the initial phases, right?
Yeah.
That is also we have to see in the architecture, like yeah.
So along that line as well, and I think Hari asked me questions about this, but he was asking me why are we using MongoDB as opposed to something else. Honestly, I don't care what NoSQL database we use. The requirement is so from my perspective is we have a UI right that is running D3 and Angular 4, so it's going to be completely decoupled from our microservice, and then we have a microservice architecture that's going to feed that UI with data. So I wouldn't think that we want the microservice to hit Spark directly, nor do we think I think like we can. So we need some intermediary like view, I'll call it, of the data that can be consumed by the microservices. And this is going to be an aggregate view, so it's going to have a lot of calculations run on it. If Mongo is not the right database and we want to use something else, that's fine. But I thought that one was the best based on the fact that the microservices are going to be mostly consuming read-only data. So if we want to use HBase or Cassandra or Redis or something else, that's fine. We need to make that decision semi-soon.
Yeah, I think
So, Tim, one more question.
yeah, probably I think because of the dashboard experiences, I think as you rightly mentioned, I think we use a DB and probably we can add even caching like Redis or something like that, wherein we can read only data we can prepare, that will be like another way I look at it. Let's see. Go
Okay.
ahead, Hari.
Yeah, so the requirement is more the microservices need to consume it from somewhere. And I'm assuming that Spark
In
is
the
gonna
video,
generate
right?
Go ahead. What'd you say? Someone else have a question?
Hari, I think that was Hari. Hari, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, Hari,
The
I
only
think.
voice I can tell is Robbie. I'm sorry, I don't know your voices yet.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim, when I see the video, they are mentioning a lot of views. There are a lot of stored procedures and function which interpret the raw data and
Right.
constructs the table for dashboarding. Okay.
Right. Yep.
So if you are doing the Postgres and stuff, right, will all those logic be shifted into Spark? Or do we need to handle for it in the Spark or
So
for a map or program running on HDFS? What?
So it's kind of a two-part question. You specifically mentioned stored procedures. Stored procedures are the NetSuite side. There's no stored procedures on the Exida side, but there are calculations that get run. So whether the logic is done in Talon to do the calculations or they're done in NetSuite to do the calculations, either way, there's logic to perform calculations. They're just done in two different places. The NetSuite one I thought was a lot more complicated. They have those are where the stored procedures are that use the views, and there was like a 450 line stored procedure there. So that's another reason why I think that should be the second one we tackle, whereas the Exida one did have calculations, but they were a lot simpler, at least compared to the NetSuite stuff. For a fact, I know that we'll have to redo the calculations in our processing, probably in Spark, for Exida. For NetSuite, there is a little bit of an open discussion, and I plan to have a meeting with Jamie and Daniel sometime this week to try to figure that out. Because the impression I get from Jamie, so Jamie, if you don't know the roles, he is our biggest sponsor there. He's the guy in charge of the project. His say is the final say. But then there's also guys whose name is Daniel, who is right now the ETL expert, more of the SME on how this all works. And they have conflicting views. So Jamie wants us to basically read from NetSuite directly and do the calculations, whereas Daniel wants us to read from Postgres and take advantage of the calculations he's already done. And Daniel knows that it's going to be a tremendous level of effort to migrate all those calculations from Postgres to Spark. And I don't know if Jamie knows that or not. So it's going to have to be a conversation that we have with them to try to figure out the best way. And as long as Jamie understands the risk and the level of effort, then I think everything should be done in Spark. Did that answer your question? I know that was a long-winded answer to a short question.
Yeah, that kind of answered it. Okay.
I mean, I know, we all know that converting those ETL processes is really where the rubber meets the road. That's really the secret sauce of everything and how this is done. And it's definitely the critical path.
The only thing was that in the video, I did not.
In the video, you did not. What?
I think Hari is facing some serious network issues at his side.
I heard in the video I did not, and then nothing.
I'm recording this, by the way, for the benefit of everybody, so that they can go through it again.
Yeah, but you missed the beginning part when I went over the overview.
Yeah, I had connected on the mobile, and there's no recording option on the mobile.
Oh, nice. It's good to know, though.
Yeah.
I mean, my overview was basically the same that Daniel and I did over the other video. So, I mean, although I think mine was a little bit more.
Yeah, yours was more, and maybe we can record it again. But
Yeah,
Hari,
I was in the groove. It's hard to get back in the groove.
yes, yes, but that was a fantastic overview. Honestly, team, I wanted to say this. You covered everything in brief 5 minutes, the process flow, the components involved, stuff like that. It was great, amazing.
I could try to do it again if you. But I've been
Yeah,
thinking everybody is on the call that needs to. I think
Hey,
I released Kranti because he's technically not on this project yet, so I don't know if he's still here or not. Um, but I told
yeah,
him, oh, he's still here.
he's still here. He's
hey,
muted
I'm there.
probably. He said, yeah, he's on and off.
That's okay. Okay. So, Hari, what was your
Team, this is
question?
Karthik.
Karthik, hey, what's up?
So yeah, so actually, while we are going through the video, in
My,
on shall I go ahead?
Yeah, go. You got the mic.
Yeah. So while we are going through the video, on Exida site, we can see number of assets in the in the video. But while we are logging into the Exida site, we are seeing only two assets. And
Right.
also, there won't be much options are there. Is that because of access issue or something? What is that?
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. So the reason why is because we were granted access to the sandbox environment. So think of it as their qual environment,
Mhm.
and they only have two assets that are loaded into that environment.
Okay.
So one of the open tickets I have for them is to grant read-only access to production, but they're very hesitant to do that. One, because honestly, I don't think they know how to, and two, because it is all their production data. So we'll have to work with the sandbox for now, and just realize that when we do get to production, it's 5,000 versus 2.
Mhm.
So team, sorry for one more question.
Yeah,
Like
many questions
so,
as you want.
yeah. So if I understood correctly, so from Exida to Unistats, based on ETL process, we are bringing the data into the Unistats, right? Unistat from Exida.
Yeah. Yes. So the two main
So
tables that Exida uses in
yes.
that
So
Postgres table are called unit money, no, TX money and TX main.
TX main, yeah, TX money. So we are bringing by using ETL, we are bringing the data into the Unistats. So from Unistats to Kafka, then Kafka to Spark. So this is a data flow, right? Till
Yes.
Spark.
Yes.
Okay. 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 So and also I have one more question. So these Exida files are .enc file. With the extension .enc. Which is nothing but encrypted format. So can we have a key? I saw your email regarding the key. So can we have a key? Like how to see the data
Yes.
inside the file?
Decrypt, yeah.
Yes, so that's the second ticket I created for the sprint, but let's focus on the first ticket first. So what I had Daniel do, and I sent this to Kranti, and I can forward it to you guys as well, but he sent us one file from one asset that was unencrypted. So he unencrypted it for us, and that was what Kranti was working with, and he was able to take that file and restore it back to an SQL Server Express database and access it. So let's work with that file for now while we work on getting the encryption. So they have some program they use. It didn't look like it was anything crazy with encryption. So they have some exe they run that does the unencryption, and all you need is the program and the password. You probably don't even need the program if you know the algorithm that they're running, and as long as you have the actual key. So that is an outstanding item that we need to push for Vinny and Ashish to help us get that. But I'm not as worried about that until we get the other piece figured out, which I think is a bigger risk. How are we going to restore that ENC file to a SQL Server Express database and extract the data out? Because what Kranti said he researched, and I kind of figured this as well. I was hoping that we could, extract that ENC file to a local in-memory database, or something like similar to that. Maybe process it purely in code, so we didn't have to actually use a real database. But it doesn't appear that is the case, and we're going to have to use some sort of real database to get the extract built in. So what I recommend, I think, is the best way is, and I don't know if there's anybody who knows Concourse on this call, but this is perfect for that because of the nature of the Docker containers that you can leverage. So you can, and I can show it to you if you want to see it. So here, you know what? I'll show it to you. Give you. So we have this site called concourse.techolution.com. This is our DevOps pipeline for basically all of our processing. And the way that this works is, so I'll show you ECS one. So, you know, and I got to show you the actual code, but this is how this works. But basically the idea is you set up resources and processes. So like TechoCamp source is just a GitHub repository, but this could easily be a file or a file system. And build TechoCamp is actually the process. So what this does is when this starts, it will, it's built on some Docker image, and you can define whatever Docker image you want. This particular one is a Gradle Docker image. So it knows about, and you could build your own as well, but it knows the commands Gradle, it knows the Maven commands, it knows Git commands, it knows whatever commands you give it. So you tell this process that you want to go build this file. So what it does is it basically does a git clone on this resource and then executes a Gradle build, which generates another Docker file, and then that pushes that out to a Nexus repository that we have set. And then we have another process that actually deploys it using ECS commands from the AWS console. So, you know, this is very mimical with this ETL process, because we could have, you know, instead of the Git repository, we could just have a file as the input. The actual Docker image that we're using could be a SQL Server Express file that gets loaded into this, and then the output could be a REST call to Kafka or whatever the hell we wanted to do. So, you know, to me, this seems like a natural fit for it, just given the fact that we have to work with SQL Server Express inside of a Docker container. So,
got you, Tim. Yeah.
Food for thought.
One more question. See, if you are running, at least in phase one, if you are running the things in batch mode, right, once in daily or something, if the calculations are heavy, can the calculations be done on the offline mode by the Spark or any other algorithm rather than real time?
Yes, for sure.
As
And
and when it consumes the data,
I don't think the
won't that be an option we can consider?
yeah, I mean,
That
definitely.
will,
I don't think the calculations are the heaviest part. I think it's the actual loading, downloading the file, the creation of the backup file, and extracting the data out is the heavy part. I think the calculations are pretty easy. And remember, we're only going to do this daily for now. So, you know, out of that whole thing, I bet you that the calculations are probably the smallest percentage of it. But I'll leave that completely up to you guys. You guys are the
because
expert in
if
that
you have
space.
any Postgres or any
Yeah, Tim, one question, as you mentioned, I think I got a clarity, because we have, say, 500
5,000.
different 5,000 different systems connected to Exida. You know, per system will create an Docker, and, you know, we kill the Docker after using, or we use one Docker, clear it off, and then pull, no? Which way? Because it's a concurse job, right?
Yeah.
So resources are allocated. We can flush the resources, and, you know, we can have that installed.
You could probably
Is
do a
this-
combination of the two. You
Yeah.
could probably spin up, let's say, I don't know, 10 concourse workers
Yeah.
for this that
Yeah.
all do the same thing. Or
Yeah.
you spin up as many as you want, because that's the great thing about concourse. It's pretty much infinitely
Yeah.
scalable because it uses
Yes,
Bosh.
correct.
So you can spin up as many workers as you need, and you could either do it for, you know, basically 5,000 concourse instances that you're running, and only use them once, or you could do more like maybe 500 concourse instances and then use them 10 times each. So, you know, I don't know which is the best way. We might have to play with that and see what we get the best performance out of. But, you know, we have the flexibility to do either. We can go up or out.
But Tim, will there be any financial implications because using 500 versus 5,000 concourses? One is the way of doing it, but the charges for that one, anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's all compute
Resources,
anyway.
definitely.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna no matter what, you're gonna have to process that time. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still running 5,000 processes, whether you do it 500 at a time or
sequentially.
5,000
Yeah,
at a
yeah,
time, it's probably going to be the same cost in the end.
Okay,
yeah,
got it.
yeah.
In the sprint, right, I did not see any activity for, say, infrastructure planning, at least with respect to HDFS side. So will it be handled as part of the future things, or we need to handle in the sprint one and the earlier sprints? So what do you
Yeah,
suggest? Because even for dev or UAT or prod, right, we need to have the says setting up instances, scripts, and infrastructure planning and those kind of things we need to do, right? So
yeah. You tell
will
me.
we be creating a what is a user stories for it, or do you think it can be taken up later? What do you suggest?
I mean, you tell me.
Can it be taken as a subtask
I
further?
would say we can start it as early as possible because because
Well, one small problem with that is
it needs to be a separate
Yeah, yeah. I think
story
what
as
I
such
feel
because
also. Yeah,
infra
yeah.
planning itself deserves a separate thing.
right. So
I
the
think
one
that,
caveat to that is we have hired a DevOps slash Azure engineer for this project, but I don't think he starts until December 9th. So between now and December 9th, Chari is going to be assisting, but Chari's pretty stretched between RRS and TechoCamp and all the other things I have him doing. So I'm trying to do just the minimal amount of work that we need to for the Azure environments until we can get a full-time resource dedicated to this project. So it's going to be a little bit of, give and take as far as what we need to get done and when we need to get it done by. So in this sprint, I did put a task
Okay.
to start, creating the VNets out in Azure so that we can start, creating some of these more secure spaces. And make sure I'll tell you guys. I told Chari, I say it on every call. Whatever we do in our Azure environment, it has to be scripted and automated because at some point in the future, we will switch over from our Azure environment to theirs. And when that happens, we need to be able to basically rebuild everything we did in our environment over there, and we need to be able to do it very quickly. And the only way that's going to happen is as if it's scripted.
Okay. Tim, another Azure specific questions. As we plan for HD insights and stuff, right? Specifically for HDFS, are we plan to use HD Insight or pure VM and deploying our Hadoop clusters on it? Because if you are using if you're using
So
it mostly as a batch or
you're kind of breaking up.
once in a
You're breaking
day
up, but I
thing,
get the gist of
right?
your question.
So maybe uh, going for HDN states will have some benefit. Maybe
So the answer to your
just want
question
to start
is
the discussion on it.
we should be cost conscious
Okay,
in it.
so I know it's not an easy one to answer in one call or 1 week. It needs a further discussion, but just want to start the discussion.
Right. So can you hear me? Because you sound like you're going in and out. Hello?
Yeah, Tim, go ahead. Anyway, this is recorded. I'll give it to him. Let him go through again.
Okay, so the answer to your question is we should be cost conscious as we can, but we need to make sure that we build it on cloud agnostic technologies. So if we're going to use a HDFS file system in Azure that's specific to Azure, as long as the code itself can run in that as well as in straight up Hadoop, then it's fine. But if we have to make customizations for the Azure cloud, it's going to be a problem. So we should build it as cost conscious as possible to try to leverage whatever's in Azure that we can to save the cost. Because I know the more specific things we do in there, the cheaper it'll be. But we got to be careful what code we build to make sure that there is a no tie-in directly to Azure or a very minimal tie-in to Azure.
By the way, Kishore comes from totally Azure background. He's the Microsoft guy. So maybe Kishore, you can also throw your 2 cents if there's anything relevant here.
That's a requirement by the client too, by the way, not by me.
Ah, okay. We see your desktop.
See, Tim, with HD inside, right, only the file path location might need change. Apart from that, we need not do any change in the code logic or any processing or anything. So if you have the location of files in a configurable manner, I think it can still be cloud agnostic even if you go for HD inside. So that's my point of view. But yeah, we can, as and when we progress and we go to infrastructure planning, right? I think that would be the right stage to decide what would be the thing to go for.
Yeah, I think only point is I think because the cost and because kind of initial kind of data probably HDFS cluster which is of minimum size could be a bigger or something like that. I think that we can decide later.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to decide it now. I mean, again, going back to Robbie's point, we should be doing the minimal we need to do to get started with development.
Yeah.
So in fact, I had kept this question to the last, for the sprint 0 and sprint 1, what are the activities that we can think, which we can accomplish, and then, incrementally start adding. Maybe Hari and Karthik specifically, make sure these points are covered, because you can't bite more than what you can chew. So make sure what things we are covering here for sprint 0 and 1. Karthik, are you
Yeah, I think
clear on this at least?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Right. Guys, any further questions?
Ravi it is okay. I will go back and watch the video, but I got I think what we can start for sprint 0 and 1. Probably I think it is a Dockerization and that is the key actually. I think Karthi has figured out now that SQL Express is required. Then you might have to understand how your concourse is running and how we will wrap it up and things like that. I think we have to fix that. That is the key. Then it is all about writing certain logics and all. I think I see not a critical path or a blocking it can create. So I think better team has to attempt this, Ravi.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Kishore. And before we wrap it up, Tim, do you want to take 5 minutes and what are the brief description that you gave initially? Can we record it at least for the benefit of people who may join later on?
I can try. I don't remember what I said though. Let me pull up my document. I don't know if it'll be as good. So we have two major cloud systems that we're using. Right now, all of the processing is done in Talend in the RRS data center. Talend is a ETL tool that is doing most of it and is running on a desktop machine that needs to eventually be retired. So right now, this process from Exida happens weekly. So there are 5,000 assets out in the wild that do SQL Server Express backups locally, and this is a full backup of everything that happened since the beginning of time for those databases. These files are pushed into Exida, and Talend actually extracts those files one by one or in some sort of batch. We'll process them, perform some kind of calculations on them, and then store them into Postgres. Something similar happens on the NetSuite side. The only difference is the Talend process makes a direct connection to NetSuite and performs store procedure views on that data, which are calculations, and then again stores it into the Postgres database. Then Power BI is then consumed from that. I don't remember if I talked about the unit stats and cases processing, but basically we're trying to focus on the unit stats stuff first because that happens weekly versus daily, and we're trying to get to daily on our processing. So our unit stats process should be able to access Exida Cloud directly, pull the files down, and then decrypt them one by one. And then after we decrypt them, we'll have to load them into a Postgres database, or sorry, SQL Server Express database, extract the data out, and push it into Kafka for processing by Spark. If we have to, as discussed in this call, if we want to get rid of Kafka and actually have the unit stats go directly to Spark, that's fine as well. And as we also discussed on this call, we could remove Mongo and replace it with some other NoSQL database that makes sense for the time. That's kind of the super speedy version. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, you spoke on NetSuite as well. Yeah, that's complete. Azure. Maybe like Hari was mentioning the infrastructure, we need to have a separate discussion on that.
Right. I don't know if that should be this week or not, but yeah, we should. We should have it. And we need to include Chari in that as well, and probably Pavan and Chari.
Pawan, are you there in the call today?
Yes.
No, the other Pavan.
Oh, okay. Oh, Pawan and Chari, the other guy. Okay.
That's big data Pavan. We need DevOps Pavan.
So
Okay.
can I set it up this week, maybe on Friday, or you suggest a time? I'll do that.
It can't Friday. We could do let's do Friday because I'll be in the office on Friday. I don't know what time we get in though from the flight, so
Or else
Wednesday,
I can do
Wednesday
it.
and Thursday won't work. So unless it's in the morning on Wednesday, you can do it in the morning on Wednesday because I'll be in the office then too. But Love and I leave for OKC Wednesday night.
So Wednesday around the same time, so that everybody can sync up more or less. Even the Singapore guys, I think it will not be very late for them.
Right, that works. I'm in.
Yeah,
So
fine.
cool. So I'll do it on Wednesday, 10 EST, which will be the same time for folks in India as today's meeting.
Sure, Ravi.
Okay,
Sure. Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for this discussion, and I hope we have specific objectives clearly chalked out. For Sprint 0 and Sprint 1, we need to get started. A lot of expectations, specifically Karthik and Hari. Kishore, we can sync up, just the four of us, and then figure out what are the first few user stories tasks that we can get started.
Sure.
Hmm?
Okay.
All right, guys.
Sure.
If
Yeah.
nothing else, then we'll call it. We'll close this call. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you,
think.
everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, team. Yeah. Bye.
Ravi, can you share this video? Ravi, please.
I'll do that. I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Sure. Bye.
Bye.